Hello everyone, we are here once again to finish up the remaining session learning objectives that we are supposed to cover in our session on blood. So previously we passed through the cellular content that we discussed on erythrocytes. So today we are going to finish up on the leukocytes that will involve the neutrophils and other types of leukocytes together with the thrombocytes. But also we have to discuss the description and function of the spleen. So leukocytes are also known as white blood cells. They are considered to be large compared to other type of blood cells, that is so large in size, and their volume constitution within the blood volume is about 1%. In a grown adult is considered to have about 7,000 of these white blood cells or leukocytes in a given microliter of blood. So there are about 7,000 in a microliter of blood as compared to red blood cells that they are less in number, in which red blood cells are considered to be 5 million in the given metric measurement of microliter of blood. So unlike the red blood cells, the leukocytes, they have nuclei, and some of them have granules within their cytoplasm, and they are also considered to be a protective system that is mobile. They are soldiers that are always in motion in order to fight or in order to respond to any invasion within the human body. These cells have an important function in defending the body system or the body against microbes and other foreign material. So our body have a special system for combating the different infection and toxic agents. This is comprised of blood leukocytes, or the white blood cells, and the tissue cells derived from the leukocytes. So we shall see what tissue cells are derived from the leukocytes. The real value of white blood cells is that most of them are specifically transported to areas of serious infection and inflammation. As I said that these cells are in motive state, the motive state of the leukocyte is considered to be important or beneficiary once this respond to any infection or inflammatory reaction at a given tissue or site of invasion, thereby providing a rapid and potent defense against this infection or infectious agents. So these leukocytes or white blood cells are categorized in the main two categorizations that involve the granulocytes and agranulocytes. Granulocytes are these white blood cells that have numerous amounts of granules within the cytoplasm, while agranulocytes are these white blood cells that have no granules within their cytoplasm. Also, granulocytes are considered to be known also as polymorphonucleic acids, whereby polymorphonucleic leukocytes, whereby the word or the term polymorph nucleic is known as from the word poly, which means many, morph, the morphology of the nucleus. That is to say, the morphology of their nuclear it can be seen as many nuclei but are all joined together. We shall see it later how this polymorph nuclear shape or leukocyte look like. So within the granulocytes, you can see we have what we call neutrophils, we have eosinophils, we have basophils. While in granulocytes or non-granulated white blood cells, you can see they have what we call monocytes and the lymphocytes. So here is the diagram describing the granulocytes and the granulocytes. So you can see the top part involves the granulocytes, while the lower part involves the granulocytes. So you see here the top part that involves granulocytes. These are the granules. They are granules that are suspended within the cytoplasm of this white blood cell, just likewise in the eosinophil and the same in the basophil. And why are they called polymorphonucleic white blood cells? As you can see here, the nucleus, this is a nucleus suspended within the cytoplasm of the white blood cell. This nucleus have this shape in which you can see like there are many or there are more than one nucleus. This is the first nucleus, the second and the third, but this nucleus have this shape joined together. they are kind of joined together. So the shape of this nuclei is that there are many. The morphology is that there are many nuclei within a cell, or more than one nuclei within a cell, which are joined together. That's why they are called poly, which is meaning many, more than one. Morpho, the morphology of the nuclei look like there are many nuclei. So the same likewise, as you can see here, is not just only a single nuclear, but it can be seen as more than one nuclear but joined together, giving the name polymorph nuclear. But also we have the other, as you can see, basophils are also polymorph nuclear. You can see they have more than one type of nuclear, or more than one number of nuclei. But for the case of the agranulocytes, you see that the agranulocytes have only single type of nuclear, and their cytoplasm contain no granules, as you can see in the case of lymphocytes and the monocytes. So here you can see other description of the granulocyte type of the white blood cells, whereby you can see we have basophils with more than one nuclear, neutrophils and eosinophils. But we shall see later why are they called basophils, why are they called neutrophils and eosinophils in terms of their color. How are they displayed once observed under microscopic examination. So here we have lymphocytes also, and basophils, and monocytes, of which they can be seen in this shape or in this chromatic description at the microscope. So here is a description of how this white blood cells or polymorphonucleic white leukocytes can be observed under a microscope. Here we have the first eosinophil. This one, eosinophil, is considered to be named or coded as eosinophil because it takes up the red acid dye. So once this cell is stained or is stained with a specified red acid dye known as eosino, it will take the color of that dye. So this is the color of the dye, which is almost red, known as eosino, or eosino stain, or eosino color. It is a dye or red acid dye which can be stained or poured on the surface of this eosinophil cell, and it will take the color of that dye. The same case for the basophils. As you can see here, this is the dye is alkaline methylene blue. So the basophils, once they are stained or they are poured with this alkaline methylene blue dye, they will take the color of the dye known as the methylene blue. For the case of neutrophils, they are called neutrophils from the word neutral, because once they are poured with the methylene blue and the eosino or red acid dye, they take both of this dye and make a neutral color known as the purple, which is purple in color. So neutrophils are as a result of the staining of the methylene blue and the red acid dye, making a neutral color of purple. This is how they are categorized or classified, as they can be examined under the microscopic examination. How? By pouring specific dye in which a specific type of cell will take the specific color of dye. That's how they can be distinguished microscopically. So the granulocytes and the monocytes are formed only in the bone marrow. So this granulocytes and the monocytes, we know that they are granulocytes. So it's only this type of leukocytes that can be formed only in the red bone marrow. But for the case of lymphocytes, in the bone marrow, but for the case of lymphocytes, are produced mainly in the various lymphogenous tissue. So lymphocytes are produced mainly in the lymphogenous tissue. For instance, we have the lymph glands as the lymphogenous tissue, we have the spleen, we have the thymus, we have the tonsils, and we have various pockets of lymphoid tissue. So these are the tissues that are responsible for the production of these lymphocytes. The tissue are known as lymphogenous tissue. So unlike other granulocytes and monocytes, lymphocytes are the only ones that can be produced away from the bone marrow. So how are these leukocytes formed, or what's the genesis of the leukocyte? You can see here, where as we have seen it earlier as we have seen it earlier in the hemopoiesis, here we can see that how does this granulocyte and a granulocyte originate from that pluripotent stem cell. So from the pluripotent stem cell, we see that these cells are differentiated into different type of cells that will later on develop into a matured granulocyte and a granulocyte type. So from the pluripotent stem cell, as you can see here, the development of what we call myeloblast. So this myeloblast will result to formation of what we call myelocyte, whereby the myelocyte now will also differentiate. The myelocyte developed from myeloblast will differentiate to what we call basophil myelocyte, eosinophil myelocyte, and neutrophil myelocyte, in which they define the properties and function and how they are framed microscopically. Here we see the granulocyte, the mature granulocyte. Here we have the basophils and the eosinophils and the neutrophils arising from their mother cell, myelocyte, myeloblast, and finally as they differentiated from the pluripotent stem cell. But here we also have another type of differentiated type of leukocyte from the pluripotent stem cell, where we have monoblast, which we later develop to monocyte. So monoblast that from monocyte, here we have a matured monocyte. For the case of lymphoblasts, which are also produced out of bone marrow cells, we have what we call lymphoblasts, that will later on differentiate or develop into lymphocytes, forming two types of lymphocytes, the T lymphocyte and the B lymphocyte. So you see here are granulated, but here they are granulated. Here they are all single nucleated. Here we have the polynucleated type of leukocytes. So the granulocytes, or what we call the polymorphonucleate leukocytes, during their formation, granulopoiesis, as you say that for the case of red blood cell, you say erythropoiesis. Now for the case of white blood cell, specifically the granulocyte, you say the process of granulopoiesis. But the whole process of forming red blood cells is known as hemopoiesis. So from hemopoiesis, we have a specifically formation of the erythrocyte as known as the erythropoiesis. For the case of leukocyte, we have the granulopoiesis for the formation of the granulocyte. So the granulopoiesis follow a common line of development through myeloblast, as I explained it before. So it involves the formation of myeloblast differentiated from the pluripotent stem cell, which myeloblast will later develop into myelocyte before differentiating now into these three type of cells. So we have the basophils, we have the eosinophils, and we have later the neutrophils. So all granulocytes have multi-lobed nuclei in their cytoplasm. So as I've said it, why are they called polymorphs? Is that the nuclei is one, but it can be seen as the morphology of many, more than one, is because it is having multiple lobes of nuclei which are joined to one another. So if we proceed, we see here how this granulopoiesis starts. As I said, granulopoiesis start from the myeloblasts that have differentiated from the pluripotent stem cell. So the myeloblasts will then differentiate into basophil, myelocytes. All these are myelocytes which have differentiated to basophils, eosinophils, and the neutrophils. So later on we have the matured basophil, eosinophil, and neutrophil, which are all known as the granulocytes. So starting from a single type, where we'll be covering each type of the granulocytes, starting the neutrophils that pick up the two dye that involve the alkaline methylene blue and the red acid type of dye, that is eosinophil. Their main function are known neutrophils as neutrophils. Their main function is to protect against any foreign material that gain entry into the body, mainly microbes or waste material. So anything that has gained interest within the body through any means, any pathology or any pathogenesis, these are the ones that are responsible to eradicate them, to remove. But only not to remove the microbes, but also to remove the debris as a result of the fighting they have between the microbes or the debris of the cells. You can see there later how it is. So here we have how are these neutrophils are going into action of fighting against the invasion of the microbes. They are first attracted in large number to any area of infection by chemical substance released by damaged cells, known as chemotaxis. So once there is a pathology or an invasion of microbes with that damage of specified tissue infected, any type of tissue that will be infected or damaged by either microorganism or any type of damage, for instance injury, those cells those cells will release some of the chemotaxins, or the chemical products known as the chemotaxins, in which these chemotaxins will initiate or will trigger the neutrophils from wherever they are, whenever they are, to travel to that point of damaged cells. So these neutrophils from the circulation to the point of the damaged tissue are controlled or are guided by the presence of these chemotaxins, which are released by the damaged cells. So the process is also known as the chemotaxis. That process of neutrophils to migrate from the circulation or from the site to the point of production to the point where it has occurred the given pathology or tissue damage. The process is known as chemotaxis, guided by the chemotaxis released by the damaged cells. So the neutrophils pass through capillary walls in the affected area by amoeboid movement in the process known as diapedesis. So in the chemotaxis process, once the neutrophils have reached at that point where there is a damage of the specified tissue, they have to migrate from the circulation into the interstitial space or into the tissue place where there is a given pathology. But how are they migrating? They are migrating by this amoeboidal movement, guided by the chemotaxin released by the damaged cells. So amoeboidal movement, this is just a similar movement as the one which amoeba type of microorganism presents. That amoeba type of movement is the type of locomotive movement of the amoeba is the one that these neutrophils exhibit once they move from the circulation into the interstitial space. So this process of movement or amoeboid movement in response to chemotaxins from the affected tissue, the process is known as the diapedesis. Therefore, they engulf and kill the microbes by phagocytosis. Once they have attained the diapedesis or amoeboidal movement from the circulation into the affected tissue site, once they reach the affected tissue site, what they will do, they perform or they have to kill the microorganism by what process known as phagocytosis. Phagocytosis involves ingestion of this offending agent or this microbe into the neutrophils, where after the ingestion of this offending agent into the neutrophil, the neutrophils will also have what we know as granules of lysosomes. The lysosomes are the digesting they are the organelles that release the chemical agents that have a digesting property against the offended agent which has been phagocytosed. So phagocytosis is the process of engulfing microorganism or offending agent into the neutrophils. Once the neutrophils have been engulfed by this, once the offending agent have been engulfed by this neutrophil, they are digested by the enzyme released by the lysosome found within the neutrophils. So also there is a formation of pus that may be formed in the affected area consisting of dead tissue. So once these neutrophils have reached the point where there is a cellular damage, they create a wall like the simulation. It's like a wall between the microorganism and the neutrophil. So you will find that there will be the engulfed microbes that will be killed, but also you find that also the neutrophils will also be attacked by microbes. So we also found the dead neutrophil cells, but also the tissue cells that have been affected by the microorganism. So this is how pus is formed. Pus is consisting of dead tissue or dead cells that have been affected by the organism, but also microbes that have been killed by neutrophils and those which are alive. But something more are these phagocytic cells, or what's called the neutrophils, which have also been killed by microorganisms. Now that combination of these three byproduct or waste product is known as PAS. So this is a diagram description of how this diapedesis is performed. So you see here, this is a small capillary. It's just adjacent to the tissue site where there is a cellular damage that has occurred. So we see the neutrophils have migrated from circulation and now getting from circulation to the interstitial space. How is this performed? It's performed by the diapedesis process, in which it involves a amoeboid movement of these neutrophils into the interstitial space. Here we see this type of movement across this capillary cell wall, capillary walls. They move by amoeboid movement, and they move guided by the chemotaxins released by the tissue damage. They will move to this site where there is a chemical damage. So later on, they will have to, the remaining neutrophils can also return back via the lymphatic capillaries back into the circulation. But for those that have been damaged or fight with microorganisms, they will form pus at the point of at the war zone, what you can call a war zone, where this neutrophil had been fighting with microorganisms, with that information of waste material as a result of dead neutrophils, dead microorganisms, and dead red blood cells and other living microorganisms. So here is also an explanation of how this phagocytic effect or action can be seen. So here we have the specified microbes, solutions bacteria, and here we have the neutrophils. So you can see by phagocytic effect it engulfs the microorganism, and once this microorganism has been engulfed, the neutrophils will release the enzyme from the lysosomes, in which the enzymes will have to digest these microbes or microorganisms. So what causes these neutrophils to rise? So anything that will affect the tissue will trigger the rise of neutrophil number within the circulation. So we have microbial infection, bacterial infection will also raise this number of neutrophils, more specific bacterial infection, but also tissue damage. Anything that will lead to tissue damage, either by injury or tissue damage by plasmodium, will also result to the rise of these neutrophils. So tissue damage can result to inflammation, myocardial infarction. This inflammation either by injury or by infection of an organism. Myocardial infarction is due to lack of oxygen, so the cell dies. The lack of oxygen of these cardio cells, myocardium, infarction is the total death of the myocardial cells as a result of hypoxia, as a result of the extreme absence of oxygen. These cardio cells or cardiac cells lack oxygen. The extreme lack of oxygen results to infarction, which is known as the total death of the cell as a result of absence of oxygen. But also burn injury can damage the cell. This damaged cell can result to release of those chemotaxins. Crash injury, as I said earlier, as a result of accidents or whatever kind of injury. All these factors can trigger the release of this chemotaxin. But also metabolic disorder, for instance, diabetes, ketoacidosis, or gout. I will see later in pathology how this DM or diabetic ketoacidosis finds that the release of these chemotaxins that will result to rise in neutrophils, or acute gout for the case of increased amount of uric or uric acid. Here we also have leukemia as a malignant condition, also result to rise of these neutrophils, but also heavy smoking. heavy smoking that will also have a cancerous effect or direct damage of the lung cells will also trigger the rise of neutrophils. So in a hospital, once someone or the patient is considered to have all features of fever, for instance, high grade fever, and we have all other suspicions are out of doubt that we are not sure what is the possible cause of rise in this temperature or fever. A full blood picture test can be used, whereby the picture will describe if there is rise of neutrophils. So once you come up with the conclusion that neutrophils are rise, then you can establish a number of possibilities that may trigger the rise of neutrophils. Whereby the first you can see is microbial infection. So you come up with your possibility or gaseous work of where the most likely site or symptomatic system that can be infected, or as a result of tissue damage. Also, we come up with that point. So these are all possibilities that will guide us to see if the neutrophil rise will describe a given pathology that will be affecting the organism at that particular time. So after neutrophils are phagocytic cells, we also see the eosinophils. The eosinophils, as we said later, are that stained with the red acid, the eosino, are also capable of phagocytosis. So they also have this phagocytic property, but they are less effective. The phagocytic property or phagocytosis process is less effective compared to the neutrophils. So eosinophils, however, are often produced in large number in people with parasitic infection and in a great large number in tissue diseased by parasites. So unlike the neutrophils, which are more likely to rise in case of microbial infection, for instance bacterial infection, that is to say they are organisms that are even in smaller size compared to parasites. Now for this case, eosinophils are present in case there is a rise of parasitic infection, worm infestation, for instance, in the lung or anywhere, can also trigger the rise of these eosinophils. So they are responsive to the tissue which have been affected by parasites. They are equipped with certain toxic chemicals stored within their granules, which they release when the eosinophils bind in infecting organisms. So we see here the organism is big or is large in size. The parasites are large in size compared to the microorganism. So the microbes that are found within neutrophils are found when we discuss on neutrophils. So the size of these parasites reduce the capability of the eosinophil to have the phagocytic effect. But it doesn't mean it doesn't perform, but the phagocytic effect is not as much as compared to the case of neutrophils because of their size. But there is something else that enables them to perform, or they specialize their ability, is that they are also their granules, just as the granules in neutrophils that are intracellular digestive effect. But for this case, the eosinophils are having the granules that are equipped with cellular or toxic chemicals that can have the effect on the parasite once these eosinophils bind the infecting organism. So it's like the eosinophils bind the parasite, and once it binds, it releases these chemical agents or chemical toxic components from the granules, and that chemical toxic component will have an effect on the infecting parasites. So eosinophils are often found at site of allergic inflammation, such as the asthmatic airway and skin allergies. So parasites can trigger allergic inflammation, but how is this triggered is due to the effect of the eosinophils. And you can see that parasites, for instance worms, they can be found in the respiratory airway, for instance to the lung, that is that asthmatic airway effect, but also on the skin surface, that is skin allergies. So once the eosinophils get contact with this microorganism or with this parasite, it will result to an allergic inflammation. This allergic inflammation can occur either in asthmatic airway, but also can occur in skin allergies. So after seeing what eosinophils can do, as they have an effect on the parasitic infestation by triggering allergic inflammation through the release of toxic chemical substance from their granules, we also see basophils who are also closely related to the eosinophils or closely related to allergic reactions. They contain the following cytoplasmic granules packed within. So they also have this allergic reaction just similar as the eosinophils. But for the case of eosinophils, they are more specific to parasitic infection. So what do they contain with these cytoplasmic granules? The cytoplasmic granule here you see are packed with heparin. Heparin is an anticoagulant component. It's like a blood softener or a component that is used to soften any possible site of blood coagulation or site of coagulation. But also packed with histamine. Histamine is an inflammatory agent and other substances that promote inflammation. So we have histamine, which is more live in case of inflammation, of allergic inflammation. So for instance, there is an invasion of foreign material, foreign organism, and the more exposed sites which have more contact with the external part of the body. These basophils have the tendency of releasing histamine, of which histamine now will result to a rise of inflammatory agent or other agents that will promote more of inflammation. So inflammation is like a reaction of the body against the organism. Now the reaction can have a negative effect, of which it will create like a situation which is unlawful, or situation which is unpleasant for the patient. So for instance, take someone who is having allergic to dark or allergic to a certain medication, is because this basophils identify the foreign organism as a threat, and as a result it releases this histamine, whereby we know that the histamine will result as an inflammatory agent to a large, or it will promote more of inflammatory response, which will have a negative effect or will create an unsupportive or a bad situation or condition or feeling to the patient. So in this granulocytes, we see that here all cell types for the case of basophils are similar to basophils. All cell types very similar to basophils, except that it's found in the tissue, not in the circulation, in the mast cells. So mast cells release their granules content within seconds of binding an allergen, which counts for the rapid onset of allergic symptoms following exposure, for example, foreign in the fever. As I said earlier, we say that there are some of the derivatives of these leukocytes which are also found within the tissue. So basophils have this cell type similar to itself, but its only difference is that basophils is found within circulation, but this type of cell that is similar to basophils is found within the tissue. This type of cell that is found within the tissue but have the similar property as basophils is known as mast cell. So it's a derivative or the derived cell from the leukocytes circulating within the circulation. So this mast cell, as they are similar to basophils, they have the tendency of releasing granule content, just as the way you said here, where the basophils have this granule content containing histamine and heparin. So in this case, mast cells also have granule content which are released second of binding an allergen, which accounts for a rapid onset of allergic symptoms. So as I said earlier, this histamine content released by the basophils can have an inflammatory effect that will give an exposure of certain symptoms or allergic symptoms. The same applies to mast cells, which are found within the tissue or the other body tissue, which are apart from the circulatory cells. So this mast cell found within the other part of the body apart from the circulatory cells are known as mast cells, whereby they have an effect. Once there is an invasion of allergen or anything, allergen is something which is different from what the body recognizes. It's having a antigen surface that are not recognized by the body. Can be dust, can be a microorganism, can be anything. Once this allergen it has been identified by this mast cell, immediately this mast cell release this chemical substance that will result to a rapid onset of allergic symptoms. So, for instance, the symptom may be, for instance, in the airway, it may result to something like asthmatic situation or inflammation of the airway passage that difficult in breathing. For other cases, this inflammatory agents may trigger rising body fever, may trigger all this fever-like situation, may rise the body temperature, may affect, may cause the feeling of headache or head pain sensation, and all sorts of fever or inflammatory responses that are a result of this allergic agent. So mast cells, we can say, are also like the derivative of basophils and some sort, because they are almost similar. After seeing the granulocytes, we see here we have also agranulocytes. The agranulocytes, as we say, that they lack granules, are a type of leukocyte with large nucleus and no granules in their cytoplasm. That is, they have large nucleus, that their nucleus has no lobes, it's only single large nucleus, and there is something else, they have no granules in the cytoplasm. For instance, we have monocytes, and they also have the lymphocytes, which are also produced by other lymphogenous tissue. So, starting with the monocytes, these are large mononuclear cells that originate in the red blood marrow. Mononuclear, they are single nucleated cells, and their nucleus is not lobed or does not have polymorph or many shapeness of the nucleus. So some of these circulate in the blood and they are actively motile and they have phagocytic, while others migrate in the tissue where they develop into macrophage. So these monocytes here, we can see that they have also phagocytic effect. They are motile once they are within the circulation, but there are some of these monocytes which migrate from the circulation into the body tissue. Just as the way we have discussed for the case of basophils and the mast cells, this is a different case. Basophils have similar cells that are actually similar, are found within the tissue. These cells are known as the mast cells. But for the case of monocytes, once they actively migrate into the tissue, they develop now, they are no longer called as monocytes, but they develop what we call microphages. So microphages are the monocytes which are found within body tissue. All these monocytes or macrophages their cells have producing what we call interleukin. Interleukin are the protein products that are released once there is an inflammatory reaction. So monocytes and macrophage have this what we call interleukin. So both types of cells produce interleukin 1. So monocytes and macrophage release this interleukin 1. There are a series of interleukin 1 and so on. But this interleukin 1 is the one which is responsible for the inflammatory reaction giving us symptoms of fever. So how is this interleukin 1 have an effect? Interleukin 1 released by this monocytes and macrophages act on the hypothalamus, causing the rise in body temperature associated with microbial infection. So once there is microbial infection within the body, this mast cell will release this interleukin 1. The interleukin 1 will have the effect on the hypothalamus. And what will that be effect? It will affect the thermostat, like point of the body or the hypothalamus, that is responsible for the regulation of temperature. So it will rise the calibration of the required optimal operative temperature of the body, making the body to have even more operative range of temperature than what it is supposed to have. So it will trigger or it will stimulate the rise of temperature at this hypothalamus, causing rise of temperature. But why does it cause the rise of temperature? It's because for this rise of body of temperature, it has an effect of this microbial infection. How? it will also affect the enzymatic activity of this microbial infection. But remember, at the same time, it will be also affecting its own body operative temperature. That is, it will also affect the operative enzymatic temperature that is supposed to be operated at the optimal body temperature. So, but also it will stimulate the production of some globulins by the liver. So you see, as we discussed later, the plasma globulins or plasma proteins produced by the liver are also triggered or stimulated by the interleukin-1 released by this macrophage. By this monocyte. So they will stimulate the liver to produce more of their antibodies, or what we call globulins, in which they also have an effect on the fighting of the microorganism invasion, for instance virus or bacteria. But also this monocyte or macrophage will enhance the production of the T lymphocytes. Or T lymphocyte is a type of lymphocyte, lymphotic tissue or lymphocyte that is responsible for the identification and killing of microorganisms. So there is a cooperation between the monocyte and the lymphocyte. One is enhancing the other, so it will enhance production of this activated T lymphocyte. So these monocytes and macrophages have the systems. There is a system known as the monocyte macrophage system. We have seen monocyte where are they found and macrophage where are they found. So this monocyte macrophage system is synonymously identified or related with what we call it reticular endothelial system. So the reticular endothelial system is almost similar to the monocyte macrophage system. How are these systems similar? Is that for this case of reticular endothelial system has combination of the following types of cells, where we have monocytes within the reticular endothelial system. We have monocytes, we have the mobile macrophage, but also we have fixed tissue macrophage and the few specialized endothelial cells in the bone marrow, spleen and the lymph nodes. So we can see here a reticular endothelial system. It has almost 3 of the monocyte macrophage cell system. So we have monocyte here, which is also found in the monocyte macrophage system, mobile macrophages, which are also found within the monocyte macrophage system, and the fixed tissue macrophage, which are also found in the monocyte macrophage system. By saying so, you can see that there is a very close relation, or there is almost a synonymous relation between these two systems. But for this reticular endothelial cells, it is having an extra type of cells which are not found within the monocyte macrophage system. You can see here you have specialized endothelial cells, for instance in the bone marrow, spleen and the lymph nodes, which you cannot find within monocyte macrophage. But almost 3 of this tissue found within its endothelial system are found within the monocyte macrophage system. So however, almost all these cells originate from the monocytic stem cells. So these cells which are found in the endothelial system are found or are originating from the stem cells which are found within the monocyte macrophage system, making this system to be synonymous or almost alike. So here are examples of the monocyte macrophage system. For instance, here we have microglia which are found within the nervous tissue. You can see that can be fixed. As I said, we have fixed and the mobile macrophage. We have the macrophages which are found within the lung. We have the macrophages which are found within the connective tissue. We have the Kupffer cells which are found in the liver. The macrophages which are found in the liver are known as the Kupffer cells. But we have the macrophage found in the nodes, lymph nodes. We have the osteoclasts produce the long bones. But also the macrophage found within the spleen. You see here how this is like a reticular endothelial cell system. But we have the glomerular mesangial cell produce the kidney. So you see here is like a reticular endothelial system, but it's also having the monocyte macrophage system. They are almost synonymous, almost alike. So these are the mobile and the fixed macrophage which are found in different types of of tissue within a human being, in which they become reactive once there is an invasion of a microorganism or of an allergen which has different antigen protein or surface protein different from what it knows the tissue have. So for instance, the lung cells, the macrophage within the lung cells know or identify the surface protein of this lung cell or the antigen of the lung cell. They know them. So once there is an invasion of allergen or any microorganism having different antigens or allergens different from what it knows, the lung antigens, this macrophage will react upon this, will result to a reaction or inflammatory reaction, allergic inflammatory reaction in order to eradicate the specified new allergen with a different antigen factor on its surface. So macrophage function includes association of the monocyte in the blood and within the lymphocytes which influence their activity. They are actively phagocytic, and if they encounter a large amount of foreign or waste material, they tend to multiply at the site and the whole of the area. So this macrophage, they are phagocytic, just as they receive the eosinophil, neutrophil, but also having this phagocytic effect. But what it happens is that once they have met up with a very large amount of waste material or foreign waste material, they cannot end up. What they do, they create a wall. They join one another, forming a surrounding wall that will surround a specified group of microorganisms or foreign body that they cannot end up. So as they isolate the material from the given surrounding tissue. After that isolation, they give rise of another immune system to come and combat the given invading microorganism. So they are like soldiers. If they found themselves to be incapable of fighting the microorganism, instead due to their extensive or a large amount, they surround in order to protect those microorganisms or whatever foreign body not to invade further on the other surrounding tissue. So this macrophages number increase once the microbial infection increase. So for instance, for the case of the TB infection and other sort of infection which have similar property, macrophage number tend to increase once this the infection or microbial infection number increases. So in the early stage of TB infection, the macrophage will tend to surround and then engulf, or it will tend to roll out to the infecting microorganism or infecting TB cells and isolate them from the specified tissue cells. So once that's the first infection. The second onset or the second infection will rise once this microorganism or this covered or surrounded or walled microorganism get a chance to reinvade there again the tissue which it once failed once it was covered by this phagocytic macrophage. So for the case of lymphocytes, as another type of granulocyte, lymphocytes are smaller than monocytes. So monocytes are large in number, but they are small. The lymphocytes are small, but they all have large nuclei. They are nucleated, not polynucleated. They circulate in the blood and are present in a great number in lymphatic tissues such as the lymph nodes and the spleen. The lymphocytes develop from pluripotent stem cells in the red bone marrow, then travel in the blood to lymphoid tissue elsewhere in the body where they are activated. They become immunocompetent, which means they are able to respond. So once they are developed from the bone cells, from the pluripotent stem cells, these lymphocytes are released into the circulation or to the blood and are taken or travel to the lymphoid tissue. We know the lymphoid tissue, the lymph nodes, the tonsils, the spleen, and so on. So are taken to this lymphoid tissue, whereby in this lymphoid tissue they will be activated. So once they are activated in this lymphoid tissue, they become immunocompetent, that is, they become competent in terms of immunology or defenses, body defensive mechanism. And once they become immunocompetent or become competent in terms of immunology, they are able to respond to any antigen. So once there is an antigen, when I say an antigen, there is an allergen or microorganism that has invaded. So they are able to respond to the specified antigen. Although all lymphocytes originate from one type of stem cell, when they are activated in lymphatic tissue, two distinct types of lymphocytes are produced. So we know that they are originating from single stem cell, and they develop into their lymphatic tissue circulating to the blood. But once they are activated now, within the lymphoid tissue, they are the point where they are activated, they have to differentiate. So we have two types of lymphocytes that arise from the lymphatic tissue, which are activating from the lymphocytes. So we have the T lymphocyte, and also we have the B lymphocytes. So after seeing the granulocyte and the granulocyte, that is to say leukocyte, we also have what we call the thrombocytes, or the platelets. Platelets now are the function of preventing further leakage of oozing or loss of blood from the normal circulation or circulating compartment, that is to say the blood vessel of the body. How is this happening? So from here we see that the lymphocytes or the thrombocytes are originating from the differentiated cells known as the megakaryoblast that derives from the pluripotent stem cell. So once they differentiate into megakaryoblast, they develop into megakaryocytes, and later on finally to thrombocytes known as, or also we know as, platelets. So the control of platelet production is not yet entirely clear. How are platelets formed or produced is not yet clear, but there is one speculation which is believed that once there is a stimulus, for instance there is an oozing or rupture of blood vessel, there will be a drastic fall or immediate fall in the count. And this is and that immediate fall in account is also involved with the thrombopoietin. Thrombopoietin is a protein which is related with platelets. So how they know that they can be produced is that, or they can rise, how they can be formed is only by speculation that if there is a stimulation or there is loss of blood somewhere, there will be a fall of that whatever amount of platelets. And how are they knowing this is that there is a protein component or component known as thrombopoietin, which is also involved. Thrombopoietin is associated platelet protein component, which also falls once this platelet count falls as a result of stimulation. But how are they controlled or are they regulated is not entirely clear. So these platelets have a lifetime of 8 to 11 days, and those which are not used are in hemostasis, that those which are now not used, for instance, for those which are old, more than which 8 to 11 days, that are no longer used in the controlling of the blood vessels, have to be destroyed by the macrophages, which have seen them in the reticular system, mainly the spleen. So the spleen contains the phagocytic macrophages, is the one that destroyed the wear out or the old platelets that are out of their days, which are no longer used in the homeostasis. So the cell membrane of these platelets have this specified type of cell membrane. On its surface, the cell membrane or the surface of these cells contain what we call a glycoprotein coat. So this glycoprotein coat has a tendency of repulsing adherence to normal endothelial cells and yet adherence to injured cells. So they move within the circulation, these platelets, but as they move, these platelets have this cover protein known as the glycoprotein, which is repulsive to any endothelial cells of the blood vessel that is normal. but it will only be adhesive, that it will only stick to the injured endothelial cell of the blood vessel. So by doing this, they stick to the site of effect where there is a damage or where there is exposure of collagen within the deep of the vessel, and they start to give the thrombic effect, or to coagulate, or to prevent the loss of blood. So they contain various substances that promote blood clotting, which causes hemostasis or cessation of bleeding. So once there is a bleeding, these platelets, they migrate, and they migrate by detecting any presence of damaged endothelial cells or collagen fiber deep within the endothelial cells of the blood vessel. And once they act on that surface, they start to react, or they start to initiate the cessation of the bleeding by what we call blood clotting. So here is an example. This is an oozing blood, and here we have the platelets accumulating at the point where they have detected the damage of the endothelial blood cells. At this point they start to accumulate with a number of chemical reactions or chemical processes. They will form a meshwork network, of fibers and coated blood cells, and so far, and this meshwork of coated red blood cells, platelets and other cells will create a wall, a temporary wall, that will prevent further loss of blood. As you can see, here is a clot that has been formed as a result of this platelet effect. So they initially agglutinate that they, once one has reached, it will cause another to have a glue effect on another, and that glue effect with a combination of other meshwork of protein fiber, like fibrinogens, will result to a formation of meshwork or network, or like a wire, like for instance, that will trap all other oozing cells and the blood content that are still have to ooze through the point of thickness. So here we have the fibrin, the protein factor that are formed during the clotting process, and they are a clot that has been formed, and later on the clot retraction occur, or there is a cessation now, or the clot that has been formed is retract to prevent even more further of bleeding. After that, we can see first through the spleen. As you have seen, the spleen is one of the reticuloendothelial system, where we start by explaining that the spleen is formed by the reticular and the lymphatic tissue, the reticuloendothelial system, and is the largest lymph organ. So it's a lymphatic tissue also, and it's large compared to other lymph organs. And the spleen lies now anatomically, it is positioned at the hypochondriac, left hypochondriac. The left hypochondriac is just the left side, just beneath the rib cages, the left rib cages, or the edge of the left, just beneath the demarcation or the margins of the left rib cage. So it's where this region is known as the hypochondrium is found, the left hypochondrium region of the abdominal cavity, and between the fundus of the stomach and the diaphragm. So anatomically it is found at this position, but viscerally it's found between the fundus, or the head part of the stomach, and the diaphragm. So it's found in between the fundus and the diaphragm. So its color, it's purplish in color, and its size varies in individual, but it's considered to be as long as 12 centimeters, so it may be a range of, for instance, 11 to 12 centimeter, or 10 to 12 centimeter, having a thickness of 2.5 and a width of 7 centimeter, and it weighs 200 grams. So here is an anatomical description. As you can see here, this is the left hypochondrium. It's just near the what? It's where the demarcation of the left rib cage, and it's found near the diaphragm and the fundus of the stomach. Anatomically, this is how it can be seen. It has veins there, it has artery that takes blood, but it contains something called white pulp, which I see, and the red pulp, and it is capsulated, covered with peritoneum, and a fibrotic capsule that is which is engulfed with or engulfed in. So structurally, spleen is slightly oval in shape, with a hilum on the lower medial border. When I say hilum is the point of entrance where the red blood, the blood vessel penetrates into the tissue or into the organ. For instance, the hilum, we have the hilum which is found in that separates the thoracic cavity and the abdomen, found between the diaphragm, but also it can be also seen, for instance, in case of the kidney at the point of interest where there is penetration of blood vessel. So hilum is the point where the blood vessel or lymph vessels, they penetrate deep into the specified organ. So this spleen has hilum, and this hilum is located at the lower medial border. As you know, anatomically medial is it goes to the middle part of the body. So it's just found beneath, just lower medial border is where you can find the hilum. Anteriorly, this spleen is covered with peritoneum, and it is enclosed or it is engulfed in what we call a fibroelastic capsule. As I've shown it before, this is a fibroelastic capsule which goes deep into the organ. The fibroelastic capsule goes deep into the organ, forming what we know as trabeculae. These trabeculae are found by this fibrous capsule that are going deep into the spleen, the inner part of the spleen or the organ, forming what we know as the trabeculae. So the cellular material, now if we go in the histology of the spleen, the cellular material of the spleen consists of lymphocytes and the macrophages, but also the lymphocytes and macrophages that are considered are known as the splenic pulp, and it lies between the trabeculae. So between these trabeculae that I've explained lies this splenic pulp that consists of the macrophages and macrophages and lymphatic cells. So this is the trabeculae, and these are splenic pulp containing these cells that we have discussed before. So the splenic pulp consists of what we know as the red pulp, as parts suffused with blood, and the white pulp, and consists of area of lymphatic tissue where there is sleeves of lymphocytes and the macrophage around the blood vessel. So the red pulp, we have the red pulp and the white pulp. The red pulp consists of blood, and the white pulp consists of lymphatic tissue. We have the red pulp and the white pulp. The red pulp consists of blood vessel or blood, and the white pulp consists of lymphatic tissue where there are sleeves of lymphocytes and macrophages around the blood vessel. Here is, you can see the red pulp that consists of blood, and here we have the white pulp. The white pulp that consists of lymphatic tissue. So here is another description. These are called the splenic cords, suspended between the red pulp. Here we have the white pulp, and here we have the red pulp. Here we have the capsule, and here we have the trabeculae, which involve the fibrous capsule that engulfed within, that are suspended or penetrate deep within the organ. So the spleen contains two different tissues. As I said earlier, you have the pulp, white pulp, identified as by letter A, and the red pulp is defined by letter B. White pulp function as producing and growing immune and blood cells. The lymphocytic cells are produced within this white pulp, where we saw earlier consists of lymphatic cells. While the red pulp now it has the function of filtering blood of antigens, microorganisms, and the defective or worn out red blood cells. So here is the point of filtration in case of any abnormality that is circulating within the body, where it will filter out anything with antigens unsimilar to what the body knows. It will filter out the microorganism, but also it will filter out the defective worn out red blood cells. So all these filtration process are occurring within the red pulp, but the immunological process are occurring within the white pulp. So the function of the spleen, the first is phagocytic function, or what we call the phagocytosis function, where it's called an old and abnormal erythrocytes are destroyed in the spleen. As I said earlier, and the red pulp is where there is this filtration of old and wear out spleen. So here is where erythrocytes, or the cells that have attained more than 150 days or have different shape compared to what we expect to have the shape of the biconcussive shape of the red blood cell, is where they are break down into products, or they are hemolyzed into products known as the bilirubin, as we saw it earlier, and iron, or to say the biliverdin and the iron component, with the hemolysis of the heme, or the disintegration of the heme part of the hemoglobin. So after that they are passed to the liver, where the splenic and the portal veins. So after the required content that are supposed to be used for whatsoever the reproduction of the blood or the red blood cells are taken, and those which are, for instance, the biliverdin part, or the bilirubin now, which has been converted to the biliverdin, which has been converted to bilirubin, is supposed to be taken to the liver, where the splenic and portal veins, where we know that they are going to be converted from the water soluble from fat soluble form. Other cellular material examples, the leukocytes, platelets, and microbes are also phagotized here, but unlike spleen lymph nodes and other lymphogenous tissue, the spleen has this property: it lacks what we know as a apparent lymphatic vessel. So it only collects the lymph product, or it only has a efferent lymphatic vessel that collects out, but it doesn't have a lymphatic vessel that collects in. So by having this property of having lymphatic vessel that collects out, having no lymphatic vessel that collects in or within it, it's not exposed to disease which are spread to the lymph. So any disease which is spread through the lymph cannot be affected by the spleen, because it does not allow the lymph to get in. It doesn't have apparent lymphatic vessel. Instead it is having efferent lymphatic vessel. So storage of blood, also it having the storage function, as the spleen is having a storage capacity of about 350 ml. So in case of any deviation of the fluid volume, there will be a sympathetic stimulation, or the sympathetic stimulation will result to triggering of the spleen to release about that amount of 350 ml, so as to compensate any deprivation of loss of blood within the circulation as a result of various factors, for instance hemorrhage. But also the spleen has the function of immunoresponse. As I said earlier, the white pulp is responsible for the production of white blood, the lymphoid tissue. So it contains the specified the T and the B lymphocytes, which are also activated by the presence of antigens. So in case of invasion of any antigenic component, for instance microorganism or other allergen which has different antigen property as compared to the body tissue, it will react or it will be triggered. So these lymphocytes, they proliferate during serious infection, and once they proliferate, they result to what we call sphenomegaly, or enlargement of the spleen. So in case of infection, invasion of an unidentified antigen factor, the white part that is responsible for the activation of the T and the B lymphocytes will have more of the proliferative activity that will result in enlargement of the spleen known as the sphenomegaly. But also, they have a erythropoietic function. The spleen and the liver are important sites of fetal blood. Cell production in the cell can also fulfill its function in adults in terms of melanin. So, as we said earlier in the erythropoietic process, we said that the red blood cells are produced in the bone cells, for instance, flat bones and the irregular bones. But in childhood or in infancy or in fetal stage, the spleen is also having the erythropoietic function, that is also capable in production of red blood cells together with the liver. But for the case of adulthood, it's not used in production, but is only triggered to do so once there is a greater demand or need of blood. So thank you for your attention. We are through with this session. I hope we'll be together in the coming sessions.